Why do people call this small city in the northern West Bank the capital of Palestinian resistance? To understand how Jenin got that reputation, we need to look at its history, its people, and its ongoing fight against occupation. Jenin is located right here on the northern tip of the occupied West Bank. After Zionist militias forced more than 750,000 Palestinians from their homes in 1948 to create the State of Israel, thousands sought refuge in Jenin. 5 years later, in 1953, the Jenin refugee camp was officially established by the UN to house those expelled from their homes, pending their return. This camp, less than half a square kilometre in size, became home to tens of thousands of Palestinians, many of whom could still see the villages they were forced to flee from. Since then, Jenin has become a symbol of Palestinian steadfastness and resistance. Life in Jenin today is shaped by Israel's constant and overbearing military occupation. Checkpoints, lockdowns, and violent raids can make movement and daily life nearly impossible. Many of its residents face overcrowding, poverty, and crumbling infrastructure. Yet even in these conditions, the people of Jenin have built schools, cultural spaces like the Freedom Theatre, and grassroots community networks to support one another. But the story of Jenin is not just about survival, it's about defiance. In fact, Jenin's legacy of resistance didn't start with the Nakba. For example, in the 1930s, Jenin became a hub of rebellion against British colonial rule. Then, during the creation of Israel in 1948, fighters from Jenin helped stop Israeli forces advancing farther into the West Bank. And during the first Intifada of the late 1980s, Jenin became a centre for protests against the Israeli occupation. Then in 2002, Jenin made international headlines amid Israeli efforts to crush the second Intifada. Israeli forces launched a massive assault on the refugee camp, destroying hundreds of homes and killing dozens of Palestinians. Today, Jenin has once again become a focal point of armed resistance, as Israel tightens its occupation and attacks by Israeli soldiers and settlers skyrocket across the West Bank. Beginning in 2021, Jenin was one of several Palestinian cities across the territory in which armed groups strengthened their presence with attacks on Israeli soldiers and settlers. Groups like the Jenin Brigades emerged, uniting fighters from various factions like Fatah and Hamas and Islamic Jihad, alongside those with no party affiliations, who say they were left with no choice but to take up arms against the Israeli occupation.
مستحيل إسرائيل تعمل حل ثاني غير المقاومة، إنه حل سياسي أو إنه في هدنة أو سلام، مستحيل.
Israel's response has been all too familiar, and it's only intensified. In May 2022, Israeli forces shot and killed Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh while she reported on their raids on the Jenin refugee camp. In July 2023, Israel launched its largest military operation in over 20 years, targeting groups like the Jenin Brigades. But it's not just Israel that targets Palestinians in Jenin. The Palestinian Authority, which has an established pattern of security coordination with Israel, has arrested and killed Palestinian fighters and political activists alike under pressure from the occupying power. In December 2024, the PA launched its largest operation yet against resistance groups in Jenin, killing at least 14 Palestinians in an ongoing crackdown. Still, fighters in Jenin have refused to surrender. So why does Jenin matter? Well, Jenin's story is about more than just one city. And it's about more than just one way of resisting occupation. It tells us a lot about the entire Palestinian struggle. Jenin's people, despite decades of displacement and oppression, have continued to build a tight-knit community and fight against occupation. For many Palestinians, Jenin is a symbol of defiance. It's a place that shows how resistance can take many forms, and that's why they call it the capital of Palestinian resistance.